I'll never forget the way my brother's words cut through me like a knife on what was supposed to be the happiest day of his life. Standing there in my simple bridesmaid dress, watching him in his perfect tuxedo, I felt like I was 12 years old again. Small, insignificant, invisible. "You're just a nobody," Derek shouted across the crowded reception hall, his face red with anger and embarrassment. "You've always been nothing, and you'll always be nothing." The entire wedding party went silent. 200 guests turned to stare at me like I was some kind of freak show. My cheeks burned with humiliation as I stood there, frozen, holding the microphone I'd just used to give what I thought was a heartfelt speech about my big brother. But then something incredible happened, something that would change everything. Derek's bride, the stunning Isabella Martinez, walked straight through the crowd toward me. Her designer wedding dress rustled against the marble floor of the country club, and her dark eyes were filled with something I couldn't quite read. The entire room held its breath as she approached me. She pulled me into the tightest hug I'd ever received and whispered in my ear, just loud enough for the nearby guests to hear, "Thank you." "Thank you? Thank you for what?" I was completely confused, but the warmth in her voice and the genuine emotion in her embrace made my heart race. What the hell was going on? You see, I need to back up and tell you the whole story, because what happened that night at Derek's wedding wasn't just some random family drama. It was the culmination of 28 years of being treated like garbage by the person who was supposed to protect me. 28 years of being called worthless, stupid, and insignificant by my own flesh and blood. My name is Ashley Brooks, and I grew up in the suburbs of Phoenix, Arizona, in one of those cookie-cutter neighborhoods where everyone pretends their life is perfect. My parents, Helen and Robert Brooks, were successful real estate agents who cared more about their reputation in the community than they did about actually raising their kids. Derek was the golden child, 3 years older than me, star quarterback in high school, full scholarship to Arizona State, and now a hotshot lawyer at one of Phoenix's most prestigious firms. Me? I was the disappointment, the quiet one, the one who preferred books to parties, who studied art instead of business, who worked at a small nonprofit instead of climbing the corporate ladder. For as long as I can remember, Derek made sure I knew my place in the family hierarchy. He'd, accidentally, break my art projects, tell his friends I was adopted, and constantly remind me that I was the reason our parents were always stressed out. According to him, I was the black sheep who brought shame to the Brooks family name. The worst part? My parents never stood up for me. They'd just shake their heads and say, "Oh, that's just Derek being Derek," like his cruelty was some cute personality quirk instead of emotional abuse. I learned to make myself small, to stay out of the way, to never rock the boat. I became really good at being invisible, so good that sometimes I wondered if I was actually disappearing. But here's the thing about being invisible. You see everything. You hear everything. And over the years, I'd collected a whole lot of information that nobody knew I had. The night before Derek's wedding, I was lying in my childhood bedroom, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars I'd stuck to the ceiling when I was 10. I could hear Derek and his groomsmen downstairs, already half drunk, laughing about tomorrow's perfect wedding to the perfect woman. That's when I heard him say something that made my blood run cold. "Yeah, Isabella's loaded, man. Her family's construction business is worth like $20 million. I'm set for life after tomorrow." My stomach dropped. Derek wasn't marrying Isabella because he loved her. He was marrying her for money, and that's when I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to let my brother destroy an innocent woman's life the same way he'd been destroying mine for 28 years. So when Isabella hugged me and whispered "thank you" in front of all those wedding guests, she wasn't thanking me for the speech I'd just given about sibling love and family bonds. She was thanking me for the text message I'd sent her 3 hours earlier. "Hey everyone, if you're loving this story so far, please hit that like button and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories like this one. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next." 3 hours before Derek called me a nobody in front of 200 people, I was hiding in the bridal suite bathroom, my hands shaking as I typed out the most important text message of my life. "Isabella, this is Ashley, Derek's sister. I need to tell you something about your fiancé that you need to know before you say I do. Meet me in the garden in 10 minutes. Come alone." I know what you're thinking. Why didn't I just tell her face to face? Why all the sneaking around? Well, let me paint you a picture of what the morning of Derek's wedding was like in the Brooks household. First off, our parents had rented out the entire Phoenician resort for this 3-day wedding extravaganza. We're talking about a $250,000 wedding, and Derek made sure everyone knew it. He'd been bragging about it for months, posting Instagram stories about the venue, the flowers, the menu, basically turning his wedding into his personal PR campaign. I'd driven up from my tiny apartment in Tempe that morning, dreading every minute of the weekend ahead. As soon as I walked into the resort lobby, I could hear Derek's booming voice echoing from the bar area. "Ashley, there's my little sis," he called out, but his tone had that fake enthusiasm that I'd learned to recognize over the years. It was his, "We're in public, so I have to pretend I care about you" voice. He strode over in his designer polo shirt and khakis, looking every inch the successful lawyer. Behind him trailed his usual crew, college buddies who'd never really grown up and still acted like they were in a frat house. "You clean up nice," Derek said, giving me one of those awkward side hugs that lasted about half a second. "Try not to embarrass us this weekend, okay?" Even his compliments came with insults. Classic Derek. The morning flew by in a blur of wedding preparations. I was supposed to be helping Isabella get ready, but honestly, she had like 6 other bridesmaids and a professional hair and makeup team, so I felt pretty useless. The other girls, all perfectly polished sorority types from Isabella's college days, chatted about their jobs in marketing and finance, while I sat quietly in the corner, feeling like the odd one out as usual. But I was watching Isabella carefully, and what I saw broke my heart. This woman was genuinely glowing with happiness. She kept talking about how excited she was to start her life with Derek, how they were going to travel the world together, maybe start a family in a few years. She showed us pictures on her phone of the house they'd just bought in Scottsdale, a gorgeous place with a pool and mountain views. "Derek picked it out," she said proudly. "He has such good taste. I'm so lucky." That's when one of the other bridesmaids, a blonde named Brittany, giggled and said, "Girl, you're the lucky one. Do you know how many girls would kill to marry a successful lawyer like Derek?" Isabella blushed and shook her head. "It's not about the money, you know. Derek and I have this amazing connection. He gets me in a way nobody else ever has. I had to excuse myself to the bathroom because I thought I might actually throw up. See, here's what Isabella didn't know about Derek's amazing connection with her. He'd been cheating on her for months. I knew because I'd accidentally walked in on him and his secretary, Vanessa, going at it in his office during a family dinner back in March. Derek had made me swear not to tell anyone, threatening to make my life hell if I opened my mouth. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was what I'd overheard him telling his groomsmen the night before. Derek wasn't just marrying Isabella for her family's money. He had no intention of being faithful to her. He'd already told his buddies that marriage was just a business arrangement, and that he'd keep doing whatever he wanted on the side. "Isabella's sweet, but she's not exactly exciting, if you know what I mean," he'd said with a laugh. "But her family's construction company is about to land some major government contracts. I did my research. My brother had researched his fiancée like she was a stock investment. So yeah, I sent that text message. And when Isabella quietly slipped out of the bridal suite and met me in the resort's gorgeous desert garden, I told her everything. I told her about Vanessa. I told her about Derek's conversation with his groomsmen. I told her about 28 years of watching my brother manipulate and hurt everyone around him to get what he wanted." Isabella listened without saying a word, her face getting paler and paler as I talked. When I finished, she just stood there among the cacti and desert wildflowers, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "I know this is the worst possible timing, but I couldn't let you—" "Thank you," she interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for telling me the truth." What happened next was something I never could have predicted in a million years. Isabella wiped her tears with the back of her hand and looked at me with eyes that had completely changed. The soft, dreamy expression was gone, replaced by something sharp and determined. "Ashley," she said, her voice steady now, "how long have you been dealing with Derek treating you like crap?" I was taken aback by her directness. Pretty much my whole life, I guess. And your parents just let it happen? They always said it was just sibling rivalry or whatever. Nothing I haven't learned to handle." Isabella shook her head, and for a moment, I saw a flash of something almost dangerous in her eyes. "No, that's not sibling rivalry. That's abuse. And what he's doing to me? That's fraud." I blinked in surprise. I'd never thought of it that way before, but she was right. Derek had systematically destroyed my self-esteem for decades, and now he was about to scam Isabella out of her family's fortune. "Listen," Isabella continued, glancing around to make sure we were alone. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Are you willing to help me teach your brother a lesson he'll never forget?" My heart started racing. "What do you mean?" Isabella smiled, and it wasn't the sweet, innocent smile I'd seen all morning. This was the smile of someone who'd just figured out how to win a game that nobody else even knew they were playing. "I mean," she said, pulling out her phone, "Derek isn't the only one who knows how to do research." She showed me her screen, and my jaw dropped. It was a private investigator's report, a thick file with Derek's photo at the top, and page after page of information about his life, his finances, his business dealings, and yes, his affair with Vanessa. "Isabella, what the hell?" "My family didn't get rich by being naive, Ashley," she interrupted. "When Derek proposed, my dad insisted on having him investigated, standard practice in our family before any major business merger or marriage." She scrolled through the report, showing me bank statements, credit card records, photos of Derek entering and leaving Vanessa's apartment building, even text message screenshots between him and his groomsmen, talking about Isabella's money. "I've known about all of this for weeks," she said calmly. "The affair, the gold digging, the lies about loving me for who I am instead of what my family is worth." I stared at her in shock. "Then why are you still here? Why haven't you called off the wedding?" Isabella's smile got even wider. "Because, sweetie, Derek Brooks is about to learn that he messed with the wrong woman, and you're going to help me make sure he never forgets it." For the next 20 minutes, Isabella laid out a plan that was so brilliant, so perfectly calculated, that I almost felt sorry for my brother. Almost. Here's what she'd figured out. Derek had already started spending Isabella's money before they were even married. He'd used her family's connections to secure several major clients for his law firm, essentially building his career on her family's reputation. He'd also convinced Isabella to co-sign on several loans for their future, including the mortgage on that house in Scottsdale, and a loan for a brand new BMW that was sitting in his driveway. "Legally," Isabella explained, "I can pull out of all those financial commitments right up until we're actually married. The cosigns, the house, the car, all of it can disappear with a few phone calls." But here was the really genius part. Instead of just calling off the wedding privately, Isabella wanted to let Derek humiliate himself publicly first. "I want everyone to see who he really is," she said. "Your parents, his friends, all those business contacts he invited. I want them all to witness Derek Brooks showing his true colors." That's where I came in. Isabella's plan required Derek to lose his temper in front of everyone, and she knew exactly which buttons to push to make that happen. "You're going to give a speech at the reception," she told me. "A really sweet, heartfelt speech about family and love and how proud you are of Derek. And I'm going to make sure Derek knows that you know everything." "But won't that just make him suspicious?" Isabella shook her head. "Derek's ego is way too big for him to think you'd actually have the guts to expose him. He'll assume you're trying to get back in his good graces or something, but he'll be paranoid enough to lose his cool when you start talking about honesty and trust in marriage." I had to admit, she really had thought this through. We spent another few minutes going over the details. Isabella had already contacted her family's lawyer and had him standing by to handle the financial stuff. She'd also arranged for a few key people to be recording the reception, for memories, people who could capture whatever Derek's meltdown looked like. As we walked back toward the resort, I couldn't help but ask, "Isabella, why are you helping me? You don't even really know me." She stopped walking and looked at me seriously. "Ashley, Derek has spent years making you feel worthless. Today you're going to find out just how valuable you really are." I felt tears prick at my eyes, but these were different from the tears I'd cried over Derek's cruelty for so many years. These felt like hope. The rest of the day passed in a blur. The wedding ceremony went off without a hitch. Derek looked handsome and confident. Isabella looked radiant, and everyone gushed about what a perfect couple they made. I sat in the third row with a couple of distant relatives, watching my brother promise to love, honor, and cherish the woman he was planning to betray. If only they knew what was coming. The reception was everything you'd expect from a $250,000 wedding. The ballroom at the Phoenician looked like something out of a fairy tale, with crystal chandeliers, white roses everywhere, and a dance floor that probably cost more than my yearly salary. Derek was in his element, working the room like the politician he'd probably become someday. He made sure to introduce himself to every important business contact in attendance, name-dropping Isabella's family connections and talking about all the exciting opportunities their marriage would create. I watched him from my table in the back. Yeah, they seated the family embarrassment as far from the head table as possible, and felt that familiar knot of anger and hurt in my stomach. Even on his wedding day, Derek couldn't resist reminding me of my place in the family hierarchy. Isabella, meanwhile, was playing her part perfectly. She smiled and laughed at all the right moments, danced with Derek's business partners, and graciously accepted congratulations from the endless stream of well-wishers. But I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she kept checking her phone, the slight tremor in her hands when she thought nobody was looking. Around 8 o'clock, the DJ started calling people up to give speeches. Derek's college roommate went first, telling some embarrassing stories from their Arizona State days that got everyone laughing. Then Isabella's sister gave a beautiful toast about love and commitment that made half the room tear up. Finally, the DJ called my name. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear from the groom's sister, Ashley Brooks." I stood up on shaky legs and made my way to the microphone, acutely aware that 200 pairs of eyes were following my every move. Derek looked confused. We hadn't discussed me giving a speech, and he definitely hadn't planned on it. "Hi, everyone," I began, my voice barely above a whisper before I cleared my throat and tried again. "Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley, Derek's little sister." A few people smiled politely and raised their glasses. "I've been thinking all day about what I wanted to say about Derek and Isabella," I continued, finding my voice. "About family and love and what it means to really know someone." Derek's expression shifted slightly. He was sitting about 10 feet away from me, but I could see him tense up. "You know, growing up with Derek taught me so much about the importance of honesty in relationships," I said, looking directly at him. "Derek always believed in telling the truth, even when it was hard, even when it might hurt someone's feelings. That was a complete lie, obviously, but the irony wasn't lost on anyone who really knew Derek. I saw a few of his college friends exchange glances. And Derek taught me that family means being there for each other no matter what, supporting each other's dreams, protecting each other from people who might want to take advantage of us." Now Derek was definitely getting nervous. His jaw was clenched, and he was gripping his champagne glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. "Isabella," I continued, turning to face the bride, "you are so lucky to be marrying someone who values honesty and loyalty above everything else. Someone who would never, ever, betray the trust of the people he loves most." Isabella's eyes met mine, and she gave me the tiniest nod. It was time. Because that's what marriage is really about, isn't it? Trust, faithfulness, building a life together based on truth and genuine love, not on any other kind of motivation. Derek stood up so fast his chair nearly fell over. "Okay, that's enough," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Thank you, Ashley. That was very sweet." But I wasn't done. Isabella had coached me on exactly what to say next. "Oh, but Derek, I wanted to tell everyone about how you always taught me to value people for who they really are on the inside, not for what they can give us. Remember how you always said that using people for money or connections was the lowest thing a person could do?" The room had gone completely silent. Even the waitstaff had stopped moving. Derek's face was turning red. "Ashley, I think, and Isabella," I pressed on, my voice getting stronger with each word. "Derek is so lucky to have found someone who loves him for exactly who he is, not for his career or his family's reputation or any financial benefits that might come from marrying him. Just pure, honest love between two people who would never lie to each other." That's when Derek completely lost it. "Shut up," he screamed, loud enough for everyone in the ballroom to hear. "Just shut your mouth, Ashley. You don't know what you're talking about." The entire room gasped. This was not normal wedding reception behavior, even by Arizona standards. "Derek," Isabella said quietly, standing up from her chair, "maybe we should—" "No." Derek whirled around to face her, and his expression was pure rage. "I'm sick of this. I'm sick of everyone pretending like Ashley has something important to say. She's nobody. She's always been nobody." And that's when he said the words that would change everything. "You're just a nobody. You've always been nothing, and you'll always be nothing." The silence that followed was deafening. 200 people stared at Derek Brooks, successful lawyer, perfect son, golden child, as he stood there panting with rage, having just verbally destroyed his own sister on his wedding day. Isabella walked calmly across the dance floor toward me, her designer wedding dress rustling against the marble. The clicking of her heels was the only sound in the entire room. She pulled me into that tight hug and whispered, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear, "Thank you." Then she turned to face Derek, and her voice carried across the silent ballroom. "You're right about one thing, Derek. Ashley did just prove who the nobody really is in this family. What happened next was like watching a perfectly choreographed disaster unfold in slow motion. Isabella stood there in her gorgeous wedding dress, still holding my hand, and looked around the silent ballroom. Every guest was staring at us like we were some kind of reality TV show that had just taken a very dark turn. "Ladies and gentlemen," Isabella said, her voice calm and clear, "I need to share something with all of you, since you've just witnessed my new husband's true character." Derek's face went from red to pale in about 2 seconds. "Isabella, what are you doing?" "I'm telling the truth, Derek. Something you've apparently never learned how to do." She pulled out her phone and held it up so everyone could see. 3 weeks ago, my family's private investigator finished a very thorough background check on Derek Brooks. Would you like to know what he found? The room was so quiet you could have heard a pin drop. Derek looked like he was about to have a panic attack. He found bank statements showing that Derek has been spending my family's money for months, including co-signing loans under false pretenses. He found credit card records of romantic dinners and hotel stays with his secretary, Vanessa Martinez. Yes, that's right. My maiden name is Martinez, too. What a coincidence. And he found text messages between Derek and his friends discussing how my family's construction business was worth at least $20 million and how he was set for life after today. Someone in the crowd actually gasped out loud. I saw Derek's college roommate put his head in his hands. "But here's my favorite part," Isabella continued, scrolling through her phone. "Derek told his groomsmen, and I quote, 'Isabella's sweet, but she's not exactly exciting if you know what I mean. But her family's construction company is about to land some major government contracts.' I did my research." Derek tried to step toward her. "Isabella, you don't understand." "No, Derek, you don't understand." Isabella's voice turned ice cold. "You don't understand that my family has been in construction for 3 generations, and we've learned to spot con artists from a mile away. You don't understand that every single financial commitment you tricked me into co-signing has already been canceled as of this morning. And you definitely don't understand that treating your sister like garbage for 28 years was the biggest red flag of all." She turned to look at me, and her expression softened. "Ashley has more integrity in her little finger than you have in your entire body. She could have let me marry you and discover what kind of man you really are on my own. Instead, she risked your anger, which, as we just saw, can be pretty terrifying, to save a complete stranger from making the biggest mistake of her life." I felt tears streaming down my cheeks, but for the first time in years, they weren't tears of shame or hurt. They were tears of relief. Isabella turned back to face the crowd. The house in Scottsdale? Gone. The BMW in the parking lot? Getting repossessed tomorrow morning? The business contacts Derek made through my family? They'll be getting phone calls about his true character by Monday. Derek looked like he was going to be sick. "You can't do this to me." "Actually, Derek, I can do all of this to you, because unlike you, I actually read the contracts before I signed them. Every single agreement included a clause allowing me to withdraw my financial support if I discovered you had been dishonest about your intentions." The crowd was starting to murmur now. I could hear bits of conversations. "Can you believe this?" I always thought something was off about him. That poor girl, Ashley. But Isabella wasn't done yet. She had one more bombshell to drop. "Oh, and Derek? About your job at Morrison, Klein & Associates? You might want to check your messages. Your boss called about an hour ago. Apparently, using company resources to conduct personal affairs with your secretary violates several clauses in your employment contract. Something about maintaining professional standards and avoiding conflicts of interest." Derek's face went completely white. "What are you talking about?" "I mean, you're fired, Derek. Effective immediately. Turns out, Mr. Morrison takes a very dim view of employees who use company property for extramarital affairs, especially when those employees are married to major business partners. I watched my brother, the golden child, the success story, the person who had spent 3 decades making me feel worthless, crumble in front of 200 people. His legs gave out, and he sank into his chair like a deflated balloon. The big shot lawyer, the perfect son, the man who thought he was smarter than everyone else, had been completely outsmarted by the woman he'd tried to scam." Isabella squeezed my hand and then addressed the crowd one more time. "I want to apologize to all of you for this disruption. You came here to celebrate what you thought was a joyful occasion, and instead you got to witness the consequences of dishonesty and cruelty." She paused and looked directly at my parents, who were sitting at a table near the front, looking absolutely mortified. "Mr. and Mrs. Brooks, you raised one child who learned to value truth, kindness, and protecting others, even at personal cost to herself. You also raised one child who learned to lie, cheat, and hurt the people closest to him. I think it's time you figured out which child deserves your support." Then she did something that shocked me more than anything else that had happened that evening. She started taking off her wedding dress. Right there in the ballroom, Isabella unzipped the back of her designer gown and stepped out of it, revealing a simple but elegant black dress underneath. She folded the wedding dress carefully and set it on the head table. "I won't be needing this anymore," she announced. "Consider it a very expensive lesson in why you should always do your research before entering into any partnership." She turned to me and smiled, that genuine warm smile I'd seen in the bridal suite that morning, before she'd revealed her brilliant plan. "Ashley, would you like to get out of here? I know a great 24-hour diner in Tempe where we can get some real food and talk about what comes next." I looked around the ballroom one more time. Derek was still sitting in his chair, staring at nothing. My parents were whispering furiously to each other. The guests were either staring at us in shock or quietly making their way toward the exits. For the first time in my entire life, I was the one with the power to walk away. "Yeah," I said, squeezing Isabella's hand back. "Let's get out of here." The Denny's in Tempe at midnight wasn't exactly where I'd expected to end up after my brother's wedding, but honestly, sitting across from Isabella in a cracked vinyl booth, sharing a plate of mozzarella sticks, felt more real than anything that had happened in that fancy ballroom. Isabella had changed into jeans and a t-shirt she'd packed in her car. Apparently, she'd planned for this contingency too. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and without all the wedding makeup, she looked younger, more relaxed, more like the person I was getting to know. "So," she said, dipping a mozzarella stick in marinara sauce, "how are you feeling?" I had to think about that for a minute. How was I feeling? Exhausted, definitely. Shocked, absolutely. But there was something else underneath all of that, something I hadn't felt in years. "Free," I said finally. "I feel free." Isabella smiled. "Good. That was kind of the point. Can I ask you something?" I took a sip of my coffee and looked at her seriously. "Why did you really do all this? I mean, I get wanting revenge on Derek, but you didn't have to involve me. You could have just called off the wedding privately." Isabella was quiet for a moment, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "Can I tell you something about my family?" I nodded. "My dad started his construction business with nothing but a pickup truck and a toolbox. He worked 16-hour days for years, building his reputation one job at a time. My mom kept the books and raised 3 kids while he was trying to get the company off the ground." She looked out the window at the empty parking lot. "When I was about 12, my dad landed his first big commercial contract. We thought we'd made it, you know. But the client, this rich developer, tried to screw my dad over. He kept changing the terms of the contract, demanding more work for less money, threatening to sue if my dad didn't comply. What happened? My dad fought back. He hired a lawyer he couldn't afford and took the guy to court. It nearly bankrupted us, but he won. And you know what he told me afterward?" I shook my head. He said, "Mija, there are 2 kinds of people in this world. The ones who use their power to lift others up, and the ones who use it to tear others down. Never let someone tear you down without fighting back. But more importantly, never become the kind of person who tears others down." Isabella looked back at me with those dark, serious eyes. "When I met Derek, I thought he was the first kind of person. Successful, confident, someone who'd achieved something meaningful. But watching him with you, seeing how he treated someone who couldn't fight back, I knew he was the second kind. But you could have just walked away. Ashley, Derek has been bullying you for 28 years. 28 years. And tonight, he called you a nobody in front of 200 people. If I had just quietly canceled the wedding, he would have found someone else to scam, and he would have kept treating you like garbage for the rest of your lives." She leaned forward across the table. "You deserve to see him face consequences for his actions. You deserve to have someone stand up for you. And frankly, Derek deserved to learn that actions have consequences." I felt tears starting up again. Seriously, I'd cried more in the past 24 hours than I had in the past year. "I can't believe you did all that for me. You barely know me." "I know enough," Isabella said firmly. "I know you risked your relationship with your family to warn a stranger about your brother's lies. I know you've spent your whole life trying to keep the peace and avoid conflict, even when it meant letting people hurt you. And I know you're a hell of a lot stronger than you give yourself credit for." We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, just eating our late-night diner food and processing everything that had happened. "So what happens now?" I asked finally. Isabella grinned. Well, Derek's going to have to figure out how to pay for that house and that BMW without my family's money or his lawyer salary. My guess is he'll be moving back in with your parents within a month. The thought of Derek, Mr. Successful, Mr. Independent, having to crawl back home to our childhood bedroom was almost too satisfying to believe. And as for you, Isabella continued, you're going to stop apologizing for existing and start living your life on your own terms. Easier said than done, maybe, but you've got something now that you didn't have yesterday. What's that? Proof that you're not the nobody Derek always told you that you were. Ashley, you just took down the golden child. You exposed years of lies and manipulation with one perfectly executed plan. You're not invisible anymore. She was right. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. Really, truly seen. My phone had been buzzing all night with calls and texts from various family members, but I'd been ignoring them. Finally, I pulled it out to see what kind of damage control was happening. 12 missed calls from my mom, 8 from my dad, 3 from Derek himself, and about 20 text messages from various relatives and family friends who'd been at the wedding. But the one that caught my attention was from my cousin Jenny, who I'd always gotten along with but hadn't talked to in months. Ashley, I've been watching Derek treat you like crap at family gatherings for years and never said anything. I'm sorry for that. What you did tonight was incredible. You're my hero. Call me when you're ready to talk. I showed the message to Isabella, and she smiled. See, you're not as alone as you thought you were. Over the next hour, we talked about everything. My job at the nonprofit, which I actually loved, even though Derek always made fun of it. Isabella's plans to take some time off and maybe travel. Apparently, she'd been so focused on wedding planning that she'd forgotten what she actually enjoyed doing, and what it felt like to finally stand up to someone who'd been controlling your life for so long. You know what the crazy part is? I said as we were getting ready to leave. I actually feel sorry for Derek. Isabella raised an eyebrow. Really? Yeah, I mean, he's lost everything. His job, his money, his reputation, his wife. But more than that, he's lost any chance of having real relationships with people who actually care about him. He spent so much time trying to use everyone around him that he never learned how to just be loved for who he is. Isabella nodded thoughtfully. That's very mature of you. More mature than he deserves, probably. Maybe. But I don't want to spend the rest of my life being angry. I've wasted enough time on that already. As we walked out to the parking lot, Isabella turned to me. Ashley, I have a proposition for you. What kind of proposition? My family's company is expanding into nonprofit work. Community development projects, affordable housing, that kind of thing. We could use someone with your background and, more importantly, your character to help run that division. I stopped walking. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a career. Good salary, benefits, the chance to actually make a difference in people's lives. And the best part? No more hiding in the background. No more making yourself small. This would be your chance to step into the spotlight and show the world what you're capable of. I thought about my tiny apartment in Tempe, my underpaid position at a nonprofit that could barely keep the lights on, my family who'd spent decades treating me like an afterthought. Then I thought about Derek, sitting in that ballroom chair, watching everything he'd worked for disappear because he'd never learned the difference between being successful and being worthy of success. Yes, I said without hesitation. Yes, I want to do that. Isabella grinned and pulled me into another one of those amazing hugs. Welcome to the Martinez family business, Ashley. Something tells me you're going to fit right in. 3 months after Derek's wedding disaster, my life had transformed in ways I never could have imagined. I was sitting in my new office, an actual office with windows and everything, reviewing proposals for the Martinez Construction Company's first affordable housing development in Phoenix. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was now making more money than Derek ever had at his fancy law firm, working for the family he'd tried to scam. Isabella had kept her word about everything. The job was challenging and meaningful. Her family had welcomed me with open arms, and for the first time in my adult life, I was actually excited to wake up in the morning. My phone buzzed with a text from Isabella. Lunch in an hour. I have news. Over the past few months, Isabella and I had become genuinely close friends. It turned out we had a lot more in common than just revenge against my brother. We both loved hiking, trashy reality TV, and trying new restaurants around Phoenix. She'd become the sister I'd always wanted, but never thought I'd have. I was just finishing up a conference call when my assistant knocked on my door. Ashley, there's someone here to see you. He says he's your brother. My stomach dropped. I hadn't spoken to Derek since the wedding night. despite his numerous attempts to reach out. According to the family gossip network, courtesy of my cousin Jenny, Derek had indeed moved back in with our parents, was working at a small firm making about a third of his previous salary, and had been trying to convince anyone who would listen that the whole wedding debacle was somehow my fault. "Send him in," I said, straightening my shoulders. I wasn't the same scared little sister anymore. Derek walked into my office looking, well, like hell. His hair was disheveled, his suit was wrinkled, and he had dark circles under his eyes that made him look years older than he actually was. "Nice office," he said, glancing around at the modern furniture and city view. "Guess you really landed on your feet. What do you want, Derek?" He sat down across from my desk without being invited, and ran his hands through his hair. "Look, Ashley, I know things got heated at the wedding." "Heated?" I interrupted. "Derek, you called me a nobody in front of 200 people. I was upset. Isabella had just blindsided me with all this crazy stuff about investigations and—" "Crazy stuff? You mean the truth about your affair and your plans to steal her family's money?" Derek's jaw tightened. "That's not how it was." "Really? Because I was there when you told your groomsmen that Isabella wasn't exciting, but her family was worth $20 million. For a moment, Derek looked genuinely surprised that I knew about that conversation. Then his expression shifted to the familiar mixture of anger and defensiveness I'd seen countless times growing up. "You know what, Ashley? Yeah, I said that. So what? That's how the world works. People marry for all kinds of reasons. Money, status, connections. At least I was honest about it. You were honest with your friends, Derek. You lied to Isabella for months. And you destroyed my entire life over it." Derek exploded, standing up so fast his chair rolled backward. "My job, my house, my reputation, everything's gone because you couldn't mind your own damn business." I stood up too, and for the first time in our relationship, I didn't back down from his anger. "No, Derek, your lies destroyed your life. I just made sure Isabella knew the truth before she got trapped in your web of bullshit. She turned my own sister against me. She didn't turn me against you, Derek. You did that yourself with 28 years of treating me like garbage." We stared at each other across my desk, and I could see something shifting in Derek's expression. The bravado was starting to crack. I didn't mean to," he started, then stopped. "You didn't mean to what? Make me feel worthless my entire life? Tell everyone I was adopted? Break my art projects? Tell me I was the reason our parents were stressed? Which part didn't you mean, Derek?" Derek sank back into his chair, and for the first time since he'd walked into my office, he looked less like the arrogant big brother I'd grown up with, and more like a broken man who was finally facing the consequences of his choices. "I was jealous," he said quietly. "What? I was jealous of you, okay? Jesus, Ashley, you were always so good. Even when we were kids, you actually cared about people. You tried to help everyone. You never wanted to hurt anyone. You just wanted to make things better." I stared at him in shock. This was not the conversation I'd expected. And I was this ambitious, driven kid who wanted to win at everything. And our parents ate that shit up. They loved having a son who was going to be successful and important. But you— Derek looked up at me with eyes that looked suspiciously wet. "You were the one they actually loved. Not because of what you achieved, but because of who you were." "Derek, that's not—" "It is true, Ashley. And it made me so angry. I worked my ass off to be perfect, to be everything they wanted, and you just existed, and they loved you more. So I made sure you knew you weren't special. I made sure you felt as small as I felt inside." I sat back down slowly, trying to process what I was hearing. Derek, my successful, confident, golden child brother, had spent our entire childhood feeling inadequate. "But Ashley," Derek continued, his voice getting stronger, "what you did at my wedding, that wasn't about protecting Isabella. That was about revenge. You wanted to hurt me the way I hurt you, and you found the perfect way to do it." I felt my anger flaring up again. "That's not true, isn't it? You could have told Isabella privately. You could have sent her that investigator's report anonymously. But instead, you orchestrated this whole public humiliation because you wanted to watch me fall." I opened my mouth to argue, then stopped. Was he right? Had my motivations been purely altruistic? Or had there been a part of me that wanted Derek to suffer the way he'd made me suffer? Maybe there was some revenge in it, I admitted finally. "But Derek, Isabella deserved to know the truth, and you deserve to face consequences for your actions. And now I have. I've lost everything, Ashley. Everything. My career, my money, my reputation in this city. It's all gone. Are you happy now? I looked at my brother, really looked at him, and saw something I'd never seen before. Vulnerability, fear, the realization that the world wasn't going to hand him success just because he thought he deserved it. No, I said honestly. I'm not happy that you're suffering, Derek, but I'm not sorry that you finally had to face the truth about yourself. Derek was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, "Do you think there's any way to fix this? Any way to come back from something like this?" For the first time in our entire relationship, Derek was asking me for advice. He was looking at me like I might actually have answers. "I don't know," I said, "but I think it starts with actually apologizing to the people you've hurt. Not because you want something from them, but because you genuinely understand that what you did was wrong." Derek nodded slowly. "I hurt you. For years and years, I hurt you. And I knew I was doing it, and I kept doing it anyway." "Yeah, you did. And I'm sorry, Ashley. I'm really, genuinely sorry. Not because I want you to help me get my life back together, but because you didn't deserve any of it." I felt tears starting to form, but these were different tears than I'd cried in the past. These weren't tears of hurt or frustration. They were tears of relief, closure. "Thank you," I said quietly. "That means more than you know." We sat in silence for a few minutes, and I found myself looking at Derek differently, not as the monster who'd tormented me throughout my childhood, but as a flawed, scared person who'd made terrible choices and was finally ready to acknowledge them. "Derek," I said finally, "I can't fix your life for you, and I can't make people forget what happened at your wedding. But if you really want to change, if you really want to become a better person, then maybe there's hope for you. How do I do that? How do I become someone worth forgiving?" I thought about Isabella's father and his advice about two kinds of people in the world. "Start lifting people up instead of tearing them down," I said. "Find ways to use whatever skills and opportunities you have left to help others instead of helping yourself. Show people through your actions that you've learned something from all this." Derek nodded, and for the first time since he'd walked into my office, he looked hopeful. Can I call you sometime? Not to ask for favors or anything, just to, I don't know, talk." I considered this carefully. Derek had hurt me deeply, and trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt overnight, but he was still my brother, and for the first time in our lives, he seemed genuinely willing to change. "Yeah," I said. "You can call me." After Derek left, I sat in my office thinking about forgiveness and growth and the strange ways that life can surprise you. 3 months ago, I would never have imagined that Derek would be capable of a genuine apology, or that I would be in a position to offer him guidance. My phone buzzed with another text from Isabella. "Still on for lunch? I really do have news." I smiled and grabbed my purse. Whatever Isabella's news was, I had a feeling my new life was about to get even more interesting. Isabella was practically bouncing in her seat when I arrived at our favorite cafe in downtown Phoenix. Her dark eyes were sparkling with excitement, and she had that mischievous smile that I'd learned meant she was up to something interesting. "Okay, spill," I said, sliding into the booth across from her. "What's got you looking like the cat who ate the canary? Remember how I told you my family was expanding into non-profit development work? Yeah, that's literally my job now, Isabella." She laughed. "Right, but I'm talking about expanding nationally. My dad just got approval for a major federal grant to develop affordable housing projects in underserved communities across the Southwest." I raised an eyebrow. "That's amazing, but why do you look like you're about to explode with excitement?" Isabella leaned forward conspiratorially. "Because he wants you to head up the entire program, Ashley. We're talking about a multi-million-dollar initiative that could provide housing for thousands of families, and you would be in charge of all of it." I nearly choked on my iced tea. "What? Isabella, I've only been working for your family for 3 months. And in those 3 months, you've impressed everyone you've worked with. The city planning committee loves you. The community organizations we partner with specifically ask for you by name, and you've already identified 3 potential development sites that our previous consultants missed completely." She pulled out her tablet and showed me a presentation that looked like it belonged in a boardroom meeting with Fortune 500 executives. "This is your project, Ashley. Your vision, your leadership, your chance to impact thousands of lives. My dad wants to announce it next week, with you as the Director of Community Development for Martinez Construction." I stared at the presentation slides, trying to process what I was seeing. Housing developments, community centers, job training programs, all of it designed to revitalize neighborhoods that had been forgotten by traditional developers. "Isabella, this is incredible, but I don't know if I'm qualified to— Stop. Isabella held up her hand. Ashley Brooks, you need to stop doubting yourself. Do you know what my dad said when I suggested you for this position? I shook my head. He said, anyone who has the courage to risk everything to protect a stranger from being hurt has exactly the kind of character we want leading our community outreach efforts. He said he spent 30 years in business, and he's learned that technical skills can be taught, but integrity can't be. I felt that familiar tightness in my throat that meant I was about to cry again. Your family has already done so much for me. Ashley, we're not doing this as a favor. We're doing this because you're the right person for the job. The only question is whether you're ready to stop thinking of yourself as Derek's invisible little sister and start thinking of yourself as Ashley Brooks, Community Development Director. I looked around the cafe, thinking about how much my life had changed since that night at Derek's wedding. 6 months ago, I was living in a tiny apartment, working at a nonprofit that could barely afford to pay me, convinced that I was destined to always be an afterthought in my own family. Now I was being offered the chance to run a program that could transform entire communities. Yes, I said, surprising myself with how quickly the word came out. Yes, I want to do this. Isabella grinned and raised her coffee cup. To Ashley Brooks, who went from being called a nobody to becoming someone who's going to change the world. We clinked our cups together, and I felt something settle into place inside me, a sense of purpose and possibility that I'd never experienced before. You know what the best part is? Isabella said as we were walking back to the office. What's that? Derek's going to hear about this promotion, and he's going to realize that while he was busy tearing you down, you were building yourself into exactly the kind of person he always pretended to be. That evening, I called my cousin Jenny to share the news. She screamed so loudly that I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Ashley, oh my God, this is amazing. You're going to be running federal housing programs? That's like real grown-up important stuff. I know. It's crazy, right? It's not crazy. It's perfect. You know what this means? What? It means you won. Not just against Derek, but against everyone who ever made you feel like you didn't matter. You took all that pain and turned it into something incredible. After I hung up with Jenny, I sat on my balcony, my new balcony in my new apartment that I could actually afford, and thought about the journey that had brought me here. Derek had called me a nobody, and in a way, he'd been right. I had been nobody. Nobody confident, nobody important, nobody worth listening to. But being nobody had also meant I was free to become anybody, and I'd chosen to become someone who protected people instead of using them, someone who built things up instead of tearing them down, someone who turned pain into purpose. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Derek. Hey, he said when I answered. I heard about your promotion. Jenny posted about it on Facebook. Yeah, it's pretty exciting. Ashley, I need you to know something. I'm proud of you. Really, genuinely proud. And I'm sorry it took me so long to see what everyone else could see about you. I felt tears starting again. Happy tears this time. Thanks, Derek. That means a lot. And Ashley, for what it's worth, I think Isabella was right that night at the wedding. You are the one who deserves Mom and Dad's support. You always were. After Derek hung up, I sat on my balcony for a long time, watching the sunset paint the Phoenix Mountains in shades of orange and pink. Tomorrow, I would start planning housing developments that could change thousands of lives. Next week, I would be featured in the local business journal as one of Phoenix's rising stars in community development. Next month, I would be presenting to federal officials about expanding affordable housing initiatives across the Southwest. But tonight, I was just Ashley Brooks, sitting on her balcony, finally understanding that she had never been nobody at all. She had always been somebody worth fighting for. It had just taken her 28 years and one spectacular wedding disaster to figure it out. 6 months after Derek declared that I was nobody, I had become exactly who I was always meant to be. Somebody who mattered, somebody who made a difference, somebody who proved that the best revenge isn't getting even with the people who hurt you. The best revenge is becoming so completely, authentically yourself that their opinions stop mattering entirely. And as I watched the sun disappear behind the mountains, I realized something that filled me with more satisfaction than any amount of revenge ever could. I had never been happier to be nobody's victim and everybody's inspiration. That's the end of our story, everyone. If this journey of transformation and triumph inspired you, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support means everything to creators like me who love sharing these incredible stories of people finding their strength. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. I've got so many more amazing stories coming your way that will make you believe in the power of standing up for yourself and others. Until next time, remember, you are never too small to make a big difference in the world.